Hi, everybody, and welcome to On the DL. Today, we are going to talk about the experience of mothering a child who lives with a disability. I'd like to welcome Jess Moran. Jess, thank you for coming on the DL.
Hello.
Thank you so much for coming on. Uh, I want to start off first by asking, how you doing? I know it's been a crazy time.
Yeah,
How is everybody?
good. Everyone's at home, which is good. And yeah, just trying to had a rough week last week, as you know. So just trying to get back into the swing of things.
So
Yeah.
I will share with our audience when you say you've had a rough week. Let's just get into it because you sent me a message, kind of outlining in a very quick way what you've been like, what your life has been like for you and your family, and sort of this blurb, which I always ask my guests if they'll just write a little blurb on themselves. And I know that's a very hard thing to do, but something that, really stood out for me is when you wrote at the end, you said, "There is not a night that goes by that I wonder if we'll be able to keep our daughter alive."
Yeah.
So I know it's a heavy way to start this chat, but it was it is very poignant, and very emotional. And I think I want to get right into it. What does that mean?
So yeah, I mean, it sounds dramatic, but it's the truth, and it's what we're going through right now, and we're very open about it. And so I'll sort of dial back a little bit. So when our daughter Maggie, she's 13 now. When she was 3, she's I have 2 children, by the way. I'll just say she's my first. I also have an 11-year-old son, and he would be what they would consider typical, just to clarify. But Maggie got diagnosed with autism at 3. She's my firstborn, so I also at the time was not living around family. We were doing some expat assignments with my husband's work. So I was kind of a little bit more isolated, I would say. And I just kind of thought parenting super hard. And then I started going out into the world and kind of looking at other moms and looking at other behaviors of a typical 2 and 3-year-old, and definitely started to notice some red flags. At that point in time, we were living in Calgary, and we ended up getting her tested. I just knew something was off, and milestones weren't being hit, things like, speaking or vocabulary or that kind of a thing. So we got her tested, and she got an autism diagnosis at that time. And with that, we were actually very fortunate to be in Calgary. They had an amazing program called Big Plans for Little Kids.
Hmm.
What they do know about children's brains is from 3 to 5, they're very pliable. So if you get an early autism diagnosis, it can really change the game for a parent. So we got her into some intensive therapies at 3, where she did speech, behavior, ABA, all of that stuff. And 6 months after getting into that intensive program, she was like a different kid in a good way.
Wow.
She could talk, she was more engaged. And honestly, Maggie is what is very high functioning. She's what they would call, or used to refer to as, Asperger's. I believe that the early diagnosis really helped her be high functioning because, again, with that brain being pliable from 3 to 5, and she benefited from that intensive therapy during that time, I think it really helped her. So as we moved along in the years and in the world, she started to present other issues. So anxiety, depression. A few years back, she got an ADHD diagnosis, which was tied to behavioral issues in the school. And then most recently, and going back to the comment of keeping her alive, she has a bipolar diagnosis. So with that, that's a little bit of uncharted territory for us. We've worked through the autism through the years, which hasn't been easy, by the way, but
Mm-hmm.
we kind of had that down pat, so to speak. And then when COVID hit, it was right around COVID when it hit, we started to witness some very unusual and behaviors that we hadn't seen. So hallucinations, paranoia. We thought maybe it had to do with the isolation of COVID and not being able to go to school. That started to manifest into very aggressive cutting behaviors. And then it started to escalate into suicidal ideations and then attempts. Um, so the last couple of years have been really hard.
Mm-hmm.
And part and parcel of that is this is all happening during COVID. So it's been incredibly challenging to also get the help she needs because of the long wait list.
You know,
So
you said something that struck a chord when you said she had an early diagnosis and there was intervention and intensive therapy. And I'm just going to harp on that just a little because I feel that that is a segue to a big conversation, which is therapy helps. Therapy matters. And there is stigma around it at any age for children. And I have spoken to parents of children with various diagnoses, and they're like, I don't need therapy for my child. I don't need to do this for my child. And I know you are a huge advocate for therapy. And because there has been a lack thereof the last couple of years for children like Maggie, it's devastating to hear where she has gone over the last 20, 24 months or so. So maybe we could talk a little bit about the decline that you have seen since there hasn't been the therapy that's been readily available to her. I know it's very different at 3 than at 13,
yes,
but it segues. Do you see what I'm saying? Like it makes sense.
totally,
Yeah.
totally. And I think one of the things I will flag is Maggie's brain is very different. So the way it was sort of, she's done a lot of testing. So she basically kind of learns only like 11% of the population, and her brain functions much differently. So she's what we refer to now as this is a very common term in our neck of the woods, is neurodiverse. So with that, I'm bringing that up for the therapy because she buckets experiences. So virtual therapy does not work for her. So if we were sitting here and trying to do a therapy session with her and you were the therapist and she was here and I was here or just she was here, she'd be catatonic.
Blank.
She does not want to engage virtually. She doesn't see that as the therapy experience. Her knowledge of therapy, because we have had her in it for quite a long time, even pre-COVID, for her other issues, has been in person. And so not being able to access in-person therapy has been horrific, frankly, for our family. Because of her diagnosis, she has to be medicated. We have absolutely no choice. We could not keep her alive if she wasn't medicated. And so going through these motions has been incredibly tough. I've had to fight and push and call the hospital, call the doctor to say she's got to come in person. We'll mask up, we'll do whatever it takes, but it can't happen virtually. So yeah, we are big believers in therapy, but these last 2 years have really been horrible for that. And then obviously we have built around us a support system of different folks that help in different organizations, which they completely evaporated during COVID because of the way that, she couldn't get that in-person support, or we couldn't go to the local center or what have you. She does enjoy going to school, and obviously that was not an option for her.
That was my next
So
question. That was
yeah,
my
it
next
all it
question.
all went away, and so it's been incredible. And then in the meantime, we're navigating through this new diagnosis. So, we've had several very, very scary suicide attempts over the last year, and it's escalated over the last 6 months, which was what brought us to the hospital last week when I had to reschedule the podcast. Many nights at McMaster, are the closest hospital to us, McMaster, who, by the way, I will say are wonderful. But it's not sustainable what we're doing right now, and it's incredibly frustrating. We've actually had to even develop a scale in our home of when we bring her to the hospital and when we don't. So a small attempt that doesn't warrant medical attention, we try to keep her here now. Something that requires medical attention, or when my husband and I feel like we can't keep her safe or she's not safe, then we go.
Can you tell me what that looks like? Because I am envisioning it, and I don't know what that looks like. And I think people who are listening to this have no idea what that looks like.
So last week, which what landed us in the hospital as an example is she had we constantly have to check on her, and most of the time actually have to be around her right now because she is going through a suicidal phase. So last week was really troubling because I had gone up. She takes the medication in the evening. I want to say it was around 7 p.m. Gave her medication, checked in on her. She said she was fine. She was laying in my bed upstairs. We joked around. I went downstairs to do the dishes. I'm thinking everything's fine. And this is the trouble with the bipolar because it comes out of nowhere. So there's no fight with mom and her or anything like that. Nothing to trigger. And she came down and her whole entire neck was cut and very close to the veins. And then her one wrist close to the veins was cut. So to me, it was a very serious attempt. Things that I know this sounds crazy, but we've had to pivot in our parenting. Things that we don't take her to the hospital for is if there's cut on the top of the wrist, we'll just try to bandage her up. If there's this is absolutely horrible. I can't even believe that I'm talking about it, but over the Christmas holidays, I'll try not to cry. We found her in her room with a rope from a robe tied around her neck with a weighted blanket over top, trying to suffocate herself. And we couldn't go to the hospital because I had COVID. So it's really hard. Sorry.
No, of
I told
course.
you I was going to try not to cry, but
It's okay.
so
Okay.
we have a scale now, which we, again, because the going to the hospital, as wonderful as they are from a safety perspective and whatnot, they don't help. It doesn't achieve anything. It's more like, the way that I
It's
can
just,
describe it, it's an intervention to keep the
mm-hmm.
child safe. They're not doing therapy at the hospital. She'll get checked in, she'll stay in the mental health unit, which essentially, if no one's been in there, it's like a prison. It's like a prison. It's a prison cell, basically. A bed, a sheet, a very, very thin pillow. They have to sort of strip search them in a sense to get rid of anything. They confiscate everything. They confiscate anything from me. I can't bring in a purse or anything of that nature. And it's, it's secure because they want to keep them safe, but they're not doing, it's not like Betty Ford where you're going in to get therapy. It's a place to keep them safe, but inevitably they get sent home where they want them home. They don't want to keep them there. And they want to do, the way the system works is that you do outpatient therapy.
Jess, to me, what this sounds like, it's so layered. It starts off your life with your firstborn, starts off with a significant diagnosis and a life raising a child that is on the spectrum, and you're doing the best you can. And there are multiple diagnoses that come with being on the spectrum.
Mm-hmm.
Any parent who has a child who's on the spectrum understands and knows what that means. And now you have a pandemic thrown in and a very, very significant mental illness on top of that layer. So, and you're not able to access therapy and help for your child. And so what do? Are you watching her 24/7? You're
We
saying like you literally went to do the dishes. She was fine. She was lying
I
in
know
your bed.
we've had to. I've the nights that she's feeling unsafe, I'll even sleep in her room. We've had to lock up things in our house, so razors. And I never
Of
thought
course.
of, when I was telling you that story, I never thought of her accessing a rope from one of the robes, which just, so yeah, we have to be safe here. That one time she tried pills, so we locked up all the pills. So we have to, hide things, lock things up, and watch her a significant amount of time. And do constant wellness checks as well. Like, are you okay? You know, we have again a bit of a scale. How are you feeling? Um, but which is helpful. I mean, it's exhausting. Don't get me wrong, but it's helpful. But at the end of the day, as well, is it's not sustainable. So I think
Mm-hmm.
where I want to go with it really is, we know that it's been difficult. She needs the therapy, and I want to get to her place where get her to a place where we can empower her to get out of this suicidal ideating and acting on it thing that's happening right now, which is incredibly, incredibly difficult. With you, and as you said, it's the multi-layered. So she's not a clear-cut case.
No.
Whereas if my son, who's typical, went in with a mental health issue, he'd be easier to treat, so to speak. Whereas there's a lot of layers there. So it's been incredibly
So
difficult.
maybe yeah, it sounds borderline impossible, and you are doing an extraordinary job. Just getting up every day and breathing is a feat, really, what you're going through. And by talking about it so candidly here, I know you're helping people because you're bringing awareness to so many different issues. First and foremost, advocate for our children, which is a lot of people. Let's just talk about mental health and mental illness. And when we think of bipolar, we don't think of a 13-year-old. I mean, it's
Yeah,
just not on the radar, right? We think
yeah,
of adults,
yeah.
highs and lows, extreme chaos, moments of bliss, moments of complete and utter hell. And it sounds like Maggie is in that right now, but she's teeter tottering between the happy and the sad. But the sad sounds so extreme. She must be so scared.
She's very scared. She's very scared, and she's also very, with the autism, one might not think this, but she's actually incredibly empathetic. So when these types of things occur, she's very, after the impulse happens, she's very apologetic and regretful, and so she's incredibly scared, and she's very, because we've been kind of doing this whole rodeo or dog and pony show for quite a while, she's very, very, very smart. And so she's
Mm.
incredibly frustrated. Similar to what you said, like, why can't we get help? You know, when your child turns to you and says, why can't we get help? And you feel as a parent, which you never want to feel, you have kids, and I'm sure you've had these moments where you do feel helpless, and it's a really, really, really crappy feeling. And for me, it's like there's only so many phone calls I can make. There's only so many, supports that we can get. And we do have her in things. We do have her in weekly therapy, and we have her in other things. But it's very, very, very limited in Canada. And for us, we're in the trenches right now, but we're looking stateside. I'll be honest with you. We are looking stateside because there is no youth, I'm calling them facilities or centers here that do deal with this. I found one in Guelph, Ontario, but they do 18 and older.
Yeah, that's
Um,
what I was saying
yeah,
about thinking of a child who is bipolar. I mean, we need to be clear. Maggie is not schizophrenic. She's not
yeah,
hearing voices and being told to end her life. She is in such despair. She's at such a low of low, so low that she can't think of anything but
yes,
not to end her life. That is bipolar, highs and such extreme lows. And she's only 13. And you couple that with being pubescent
yeah.
and having an ADHD and impulsivity diagnosis as well. Um, it just sounds too much. It sounds too much.
It's a
and you
lot.
and you don't have the help because we live in a country where the pandemic is real and it continues. You look to the United States, and I can say this because I have family that live in the US. I have friends that are there for the winter, and they're like, there's COVID everywhere, but there's no COVID. Like everyone just
Hmm.
exists. We wear our masks, we go about our day, and people get sick and they need to go to the hospital, they go to the hospital. If they get even sicker, then that's a very sad situation. But nobody has stopped their life anymore, particularly around therapies. Um, but we live in a place where that's happening. So what do you do?
I don't have the answer. My approach has been to, as much as I can, get her help. Um, they have, over the last little while, there have been some in-person things opening up. She does have a private therapist that she sees once a week to do more what I would liken to
Oh,
talk therapy, which is great. And we've
beautiful.
had that in place for a while. And that particular therapist has allowed her to come in person quite a bit,
That's
which
great.
is fantastic. And going back to that point, though, I will flag for you. We're lucky. We're hard work. Don't get me wrong. We're hardworking, but we're lucky because we do have means to be able to pay for that. So the other thing, which I know I have my own problems, but I often also think, I try to look at the positive and the silver lining. And I do think of people who don't have the means and couldn't pay out of pocket for therapy, or
No,
couldn't,
of
even with us
course.
looking stateside, like couldn't ever even dream of affording to do that, where we are fortunate in that way. Um, so
But even so,
I
Jess, I
know
mean,
it, yeah,
even if you are fortunate, it's still okay. Maybe you're more fortunate than someone else who couldn't even entertain the idea. But even so, it's insane, the idea that you'd have to go out of your own
yeah,
country to get help. We have the most incredible doctors in Canada. People come from all over the world to practice in Canada, and it's mind-boggling, right? And it just should not be that way. It just shouldn't be that way at all. Whether you have the means or you don't have the means, you shouldn't be suffering, nor should your child.
yeah.
End of the
So
story.
it's true. And yeah, we live in a society too where we have a good healthcare system, but
Yeah.
we pay taxes heftily.
Yes.
So
Of
we
course.
kind of, yeah. So but for me, I'm also a big, just even in my business, and the way my brain works is I'm very solutions oriented. So this is very difficult for me too, because I want a solution, so to speak, and I do fight for that where I can. So right now, the current status is we do have a great team at McMaster at Ron Joyce Center that we work with, and we're in regular contact with them. And she is, again, as they went back to the medication side, they are working with us and have told us it is a slow process with the medication for the things that you referred
Oh,
to, hormonal, all those things. You can't pummel someone at her age with a whole bunch of medications. She was also on some existing medications. So we have a team that's working to refine that. And then the second thing is, um, there is something that I've had to educate myself on, and it's a specific kind of therapy which apparently is quite successful for those with bipolar, called dialectical behavioral therapy, and they shortened it to DBT. And I've had to do a ton of reading on this. I had no idea what it was until I was thrown into this. So right now, this DBT has a very high success rate, but what they've deduced is, given her condition, she needs intensive DBT. Well, we are on a wait list for that,
mm.
which is allegedly in the very, very earliest 6 months. However, I'm like squeaky wheel right now, pushing, pushing, pushing. And it sounds like, there is a wait list, but kids do get prioritized depending on the need. So no, this sounds horrible to say, but I've also learned to work the system.
Well,
So,
everybody says that.
like,
You're not
do
alone.
yeah, yeah.
You're not
Do
alone.
I want to be at the hospital? No, I don't. But it's like almost like the more you have that on your record, the higher you get bumped up this wait list. So the way that the system works too is you kind of get to know that, and you kind of have to work it if you want to get bumped up. So right now she's on that wait list. My hope is that we'll get bumped up and we won't have to wait the 6 months. I even, because I'm a crazy mom, like ordered a whole bunch of DBT books off of Amazon, and I'm certainly not a professional, but I'm educating myself as much as I possibly can. Um, and
Wait, I do want to
yeah,
tell everybody when you just said that, uh, Jess is in PR. She has a leading firm in Canada, and she has been named one of PR people in Canada, top 40 under 40. So you are a very successful business person. You're very successful in the PR world, and you are recognized, and people know you for your hard work. And I can tell you that I was speaking with somebody earlier who said, I had no idea that Jess had this part of her life. Like you, I know we all compartmentalize our shit, especially
mhm,
our family shit.
yeah.
We keep it close to our chest, and we don't really let a lot of people in. And I know that's the way this has been for you because you are so successful. But I think you have so much courage speaking about this, um, because you are out there. You are a public person, and you are the person speaking to people about their public persona,
Yeah,
right? You're the one giving
yeah.
advice about how you should be going out into this world. And I know you're putting yourself out there right now. And I feel grateful having this conversation with you. And I think a lot of people listening to this will feel grateful because you're normalizing it. You are a hardworking mom.
Mhm.
There are so many of us out there that have children that we're not ashamed. We just don't talk about it. We don't want to talk about it because we can't.
Yeah, and I still sort of struggle with that. And then, I've sort of now reached a point where I've done the advocacy piece. I'm very
Mm-hmm.
open about it. And I'm starting to even become more open about it because I just think with myself being more open about it and encouraging Maggie to be open about it, there shouldn't be shame in it. There shouldn't be shame
I
in mental
agree.
health. And yeah,
I
okay. So
agree.
then I also think, what would you do if your child, like God forbid, but this is maybe a poor example, but if your child had cancer, let's just say, and you're at the hospital doing, because your child was going through chemo or whatever, you'd probably tell people, and more or less, or especially if you're in business, you don't have to shout it from the rooftops, but if you're dealing with people or whatever else. And so I try to sort of think of it that way and think, well, you know what, it might sound totally bananas to people, but you know what, it's my life. And by the way, with that, it ain't going anywhere. Like,
Mm-hmm.
this is a long haul. This isn't like, again, with a treatment that you're going to do the treatment and everything's going to be rosy. Like, this is
Oh,
going to be a lifetime of this. So my whole
this is
thing
your
is,
child.
this is my child, this is my life. It ebbs and flows. There's going to be moments where I can totally focus on business. There's going to be moments where I can have to prioritize family. And to me, I've just sort of tried to just turn it into this, like, just dance. Like, it's
Back
just
and
kind
forth.
of, it is what it is. You're kind of back and forth. You're kind of
Mm-hmm.
working, you're not. And I also, for me, I love what I do. And whether it's healthy or not, I'm the type too where if I'm sitting there for hours at the hospital to get my mind off things, I am maybe working. I'm maybe sending a work email, not because I have to, because I want to. And because for
Yeah, it
me,
helps.
it's
It's
an
therapeutic for
outlet,
you.
it's a
Mm-hmm.
distraction. It's,
Mm-hmm.
something that I feel good about. It's kind of like my little therapy. And like, even going back to that, you and I feel like had a conversation about this on the phone, but even just like, regardless of all this, the stuff that I've dealt with her, but I think any mom, and actually I was talking to a mom with younger kids who's at least 10 years younger than I am. And she's going through a moment, which I totally had this moment. You probably did too, where you reach a point and I feel like you kind of get through those baby years, which I call like the coping, you're not sleeping, it's disaster. But then I reached a point where it was like, I needed something that was just mine, not my husband's, not
Mm.
my kids, just mine. For me, that was work. Doesn't have to be. For someone else, it could be volunteering. But often, if I talk to like younger moms who are having that moment, I'll say, you need to carve out something that's just yours. It's you, because you lose that. You lose your identity, very easily it can slip away. So no matter what that is, and I think it's different for everybody, like I wish I could go back and tell myself that before I had to, do so much marriage therapy and counseling.
That's a whole other episode. It's a whole other, we can get into that whole other episode, but that's another segue that I was going to ask you in my whole list of questions that I'm looking at right now. How do you deal? Like, what do you do to get through this life? And you just answered that. You carve out something for yourself,
Yeah.
which is huge. Which is just that's a huge life lesson when you think
Yeah.
about it, right? Like, just do something for yourself,
Yes.
whatever that may be. It has to be your own, um, however severe or serious the situation is with your child or your family.
Yeah.
It sounds like
Yeah.
that's
So
what you do for you.
yeah. And for me, like a lot of that is work. I also make sure, like, obviously, and I feel like you're of the same mindset, self-care is really important. So, for me too, I do like a big de-stressor for me is working out. So, I also try to prioritize that. I mean, sometimes I'm bagged and it just doesn't happen, but I
Of
try to
course.
prioritize that. I try to, when I can, and, when I'm not living at the hospital, try to prioritize nutrition. So, those types of things too are kind of my method of self-care.
What
Um,
about sleep? How do you
yes,
sleep?
sleep, definitely as much as I can, again, unless we're going through a moment,
Mm-hmm.
prioritize that and make sure that I have generally a decent sleep schedule too. So absolutely, just
What
doing that.
what about your husband?
So
How's he?
my he's good. My husband he does work a lot. He's out of the home a lot, and he does work for a large corporation, and he has a very senior role there. And frankly, like for us too, that has really benefited us because with that gives us a large amount of security, as I had talked about, where, we're not worried about, we get really great benefits, we get all of those things. I think he has had a very difficult time with this because, as I was talking about that feeling of helplessness, and I'm not trying to be sexist, but,
Mm.
with the man and the way that he has kind of he sort of, I think, would picture himself as provider, taking care of the family, also coming up with solutions. And with that feeling of helplessness, I think particularly in men is incredibly difficult to work through.
Very
Incredibly
much.
difficult. So it's been
Yes.
a real challenge for him, a real challenge. The other thing too is I feel like it's been a real challenge with him to be able to communicate it to he's far more private than I am. So to be able to communicate it to his workplace too.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and
Mm-hmm.
then having people kind of get it, because I think there was one day where he had to leave and come to the hospital, meet me at the hospital. And, he's kind of talking to whomever is his people at work about it. And he said to me, he's like, I couldn't tell them, I didn't feel comfortable telling them what really was going on because I was afraid I was going to lose it. And again, strong, big man, like, all that, little, probably more alpha is the way I would describe him. Um, he's like, I knew I was just going to lose it. And he has this, big team he manages. And he's like, I didn't feel comfortable, like kind of losing my shit in front of them.
Yeah.
So he's just kind of saying,
Reasonable.
yeah, my daughter's in the hospital and everything. And so, but some of the comments like make me laugh because I'm back to the, oh yeah, 13-year-old girls. Like, I think in my head, like, no, you have no idea. But anyways, so he processes it differently for sure and handles it much differently. We have a very like we have, I joked about it, but for honest to goodness, we've done therapy on and off over the years, which has been incredibly helpful, just having a special needs
For the two of you.
child for the two of us, just
Yeah.
marriage stuff. And then the other thing too that we do, which a friend of mine and her daughter has something called Rets, but she's a photographer in Toronto. She's lovely. Michelle is her name. Her and I had worked on some projects together, and she actually, like, I had an aha moment. The one night we're at a hotel, we're doing a shoot, the shoot's done, we're having wine, we have this beautiful suite, we're, just doing the girl talk thing. And she told me that what her husband and her do is on some frequency, let's say once a month or once every couple months, they get a bottle of wine.
This is getting exciting. On the deals, we're going to a happy place. Okay, good. Where are we going with this, Jess?
And they sit and they say no judgment zone. They say all of the ugly feelings that they have been feeling. Because when you are the parent of a special needs child, you have these really ugly emotions and ugly thoughts and feelings, which you actually are like disgusted with yourself for feeling, but they're natural. And she's like, try it. You got to try this. Like, it's so therapeutic. So my husband and I started doing that. And it seems like such a simple thing, but like, even though you're very close, like I've been married for now going on 16 years and I'm very close, but I just never thought to do that. And I'm telling you, it is like better than therapy, feels amazing. And the person doesn't even have to say anything back. You just say all of those ugly thoughts, feelings, and emotions. The other person's going to just accept you no matter what. And there's something about uttering the words and getting them out there that's like incredibly therapeutic.
Where is Maggie at right now? Like, what is today like for her?
So when they have an attempt to get she's back at home, but she has to reintegrate into the school, and you have to do all these meetings to get them back into the school to make sure they're safe at school when there is a suicide attempt. So we were at the school yesterday doing some meetings. She went back to school yesterday. And then today we had a series of appointments. So right now she's with my sister who's in town. But the other thing that I will bring up that totally just sucks. And again, there's no fix all, because there's no fix for this. I think kids are just mean. But even getting her back into school, so all this change is very difficult. And, kids are bullying her at school. She's an easy target. So it's like, it never, I feel like it just never lets up. She comes home yesterday devastated because kids were making fun of her. And
making fun of her? How? They know her situation? They knew she was in the hospital?
I don't know that they knew she was in the hospital, but like, I'll be crass on here, but she's telling me this is happening at recess at the schoolyard. And by the way, just caveat, like, her school is fantastic and very supportive. But yeah, there was a kid that called her. She came home and she told me, sorry, I'm laughing because her and I chuckled about it. There's one kid in particular that relentlessly picks on her, but he called her an autistic fuck.
Ew, gross.
Right? And she's trying to get back into school. So I'm like, I know that's going to happen. It's just, again, this whole kind of almost vicious cycle where you've got somebody and you're trying to keep them not depressed, and then they're trying to get back into school, and then that kind of occurs, right? So, the other thing I would say is, like, and again, kids aren't always going to listen to their parents, but at the same time, like, just teaching kids kindness. I think if you are a fellow parent, and that people are coming from different journeys, and they probably don't know, they knew she was gone last week, they probably don't know she was in the hospital, but it's
that's terrible.
Be kind. Teach your kids to be kind.
This should be the number one thing.
Yeah.
We would hope that. I read a tweet, probably was about maybe a month ago, maybe 6 weeks ago. And I'm paraphrasing because I don't remember exactly exactly the words, but basically what this father had said was that he was sitting in the parking lot of a hospital. And he basically said, God forgive me for saying this, but as I sit here, as my daughter has had yet another suicide attempt, and I'm waiting now in the parking lot, I wish we all just would have gotten this virus, AKA a flu. I'm paraphrasing, everyone, don't get mad at me. I didn't say this. And then gotten on with our lives. So when I say this to you, I see you nodding your head. Do you feel like, and I'm going to leave this as the last question to you, do you feel like the lockdowns, the severity of the isolation, the intensity of where we have gone with this pandemic has been such a huge deficit for Maggie in regards to her journey. Would her diagnosis of bipolar and the outcome have been so severe had we not been in a worldwide pandemic?
I don't think they would have. And I think, as I was sort of just discussing with that anecdote, that it's exacerbated it too. So it's like this probably would have happened no matter with her brain, but it would have been handled a lot differently and probably not as amplified, if that makes sense. And the other thing,
Absolutely.
and I would just say on that note, and again, like going back to this article that I got to weigh in on in the Toronto Star that I had sent to you. The other thing too that I do want to add is the disability community, mental health, whatever you want to bucket it as, because everybody calls it different things, um, in this pandemic have been totally left behind
Yes.
completely. And nonsense rules. So like, I'll take it a little bit away from Maggie, and I'll try not to go on too much of a tangent here. But I also have a disabled brother who spends some time with me, and he's severely intellectually disabled, and he's 33. He goes to a day center, still is with my parents, goes to a day center. He's a whole other story too, by the way. But at any
Hmm.
rate, my parents are older. They care for him. But this day program is their savior because he goes there all day from 9 to 4, loves it, fantastic. It's social enterprise. They shred paper there, lovely. When this pandemic hit, that center closed. They were faced with 24-hour care as seniors with their disabled son with zero help. This is someone who can't bathe themselves, who can't, again, not to take it away from Maggie's journey, and she's had her own set of trials and tribulations, but she has a normal amount of independence, so to speak, for that age. But that is what I cannot fathom. And then when I
Me
talk
neither.
about these weird blanket rules, his center wasn't allowed to reopen because of a federal mandate. It should have, when it was closed far too long. And I think what the government doesn't realize is there's families that are hanging on by a thread, and completely forgotten. And I know we're not the only one at all, but I'll just sort of leave that as a final note. And I don't know that there is a solution to it, but it's, it hopefully it will be, if this continues on in any capacity, that whole facet needs to be re-examined and needs to be overhauled completely, because there are probably
Overhauled.
hundreds of families like ours that need help, and there's no reason why they shouldn't be getting help. That's why we live in Canada, right? That's why I love living in Canada. We help those in need. We help vulnerable people. We prioritize vulnerable people. We prioritize elderly. We prioritize the disabled. That's part of, to me, the fabric of being Canadian. And that's not happening right now in our
Are
country. It's super
are
sad.
you amenable if people want to reach out to you?
Yeah.
Where would people find you?
I'm on Twitter at Jess triple M with my last name Moran. I haven't. My agency is called The Known Group, so you can just Google us and we'll come up online. Those are probably the two best places, and you can kind of get my email from there. If you're on Twitter, shoot me a direct message. But yeah, I'm happy to chat. Happy to chat with other parents, given our journey. And I'm going to continue to keep advocating because we have a voice and it needs to be heard. I
Jess,
won't, if
thank you.
anything, it fuels my passion to, you know, change.
You're just a very strong, well, I think all mothers are strong, actually. It's all relative, but because every mom I've spoken to here and otherwise, I'm always blown away by their strength and their compassion for mothering and for their children. And this is goes above and beyond. And I pray for Maggie. I hope that she gets through this chunk of her life um, in the healthiest way that she can, and that you are able to get the therapy that you need for her. And I think everybody who's listening to this probably feels the exact same way as I do. And I appreciate how candid you've been. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it.
Thanks, Jess. Be well.